Okay, we've done it. We made it to episode 60 of the System Failure Podcast. What's going on, Nate?
Hey, Brian. Number 60 indeed. And on the momentous occasion of number 60, we have a third person with us today. Once again in studio, we've got Chris Libertarian joining us. Good to see you again, sir.
Guten Tag, gents and listeners. I recognize I've darkened your doorstep quite a bit, but as your token libertarian, with the election rapidly approaching, I'm... this is the one time every 4 years that libertarians almost matter in American politics. So this is my moment.
Well, we're honored to have you here.
Very funny. Well, speaking of the election, my good friends, I do have just something to marvel at in the way that one might marvel at a museum exhibit behind the Lucite case. And this, of course, is an unfortunate Facebook post from one of my dear friends. So we're going to keep this person completely anonymous. The flavor of the post is not meant to denigrate this specific person, but merely to identify a specific strain of dysfunction running through our society. And of course, it will shock no one out there to hear that this post is going to be a TDS example. Like, this is a person who is saying, basically, if you are voting for the Donald, get out of my life, right? And so this is... It's sad to see because what we're dealing with here, the historical context that you'll not get on CNN, is that we are experiencing the revenge of the ruling class for the New Deal in the 1930s, which they end up having to fund with increased taxes on the wealthy. They never forgave the Roosevelt administration for that, and it took the emergent spy apparatus that congealed during the Second World War and the control of that apparatus by nefarious actors to bring about the last 50-some-odd years of American politics, which have culminated in the dubious candidacy of Mr. Trump. Now, I think the thing to do here is to just quickly read the Facebook post in question, and then we can all sit around and marvel at the wreckage of American society in the way that one might marvel at the twisted metal and carnage of a car accident on the side of the highway. So
this is, in some ways, why we invented the internet, is to marvel at human stupidity 24/7, 365.
Is that the first reason? I mean, I agree that's what it's coming to, but I don't feel like that was the original vision there, Sir Meyer. But anyway, let me now just briefly read the post in question. It says, let's see. I married into a wonderful Puerto Rican family, and I love them very much. If you vote for Trump, you are casting a vote against my family, and you are a racist danger to society. How long does he have to go for you to say enough is enough? And this has some 76 likes and a whole bunch of comments. Some people, feeling offended that, like, so wait, because of my preferred choice of candidate, I'm now like a racist, and people saying goodbye to each other for like the last time ever via Facebook. It's a truly depressing post. I will venture a guess that the specifics of this post aren't important. The thing matches a archetype or a pattern, which I think probably everyone's seeing play out on their Facebook feed and on the eve of the 24 election.
Well, I guess I thought maybe they're gonna take. I see they're offended by the Puerto Rico joke by Tony Hinchcliffe at the rally at Madison Square Garden. So I guess they're not coming in with the fascist angle. They're coming with that Trump's a racist. And man, I think I guess mostly I feel bad for your friend, or I don't want to think that. I mean, your outputs like that are a result of like the inputs.
Yeah.
And so whatever media you consume is going to paint, your version of the world. So like, obviously that's what they're responding to. So, I don't want to make fun of your friend there too much, cause that's just kind of the way it goes. But it is unfortunate.
Yeah. Meyer, what are your initial thoughts on such a Facebook post?
As a longtime independent and third-party voter, those kinds of posts are not uncommon, sadly.
Yeah.
And it's I don't mean to get too philosophical too quickly, but it seems to be as evidence of a growing disinterest in collective empathy for other worldviews, religious, political, social ideologies within the United States. It's not. I would say, and you can feel free to disagree. Maybe we can get some fodder on this. It's not strictly a Democrat problem.
Agreed.
It's a party lock problem. It's a tendency. I think it reflects an inherent tendency of people to become tribal and to organize ourselves in groups and out groups. And that's an effective way to weaponize and activate a political base. And it's a bummer to see, basic human impulses be weaponized like that.
I think a withdrawal of empathy is exactly, exactly the right way to describe what's happening. And then in a withdrawal of empathy in the name of empathy in a lot of cases, which leads you to go to just wonder about the circular logic of this thing. I think the reality is that we're watching the entire middle class, that the America's hallmark. We're watching the entire middle class be slowly consumed. And that the candidacy of the Donald is... Look, there are plenty of confused people voting for the Donald and plenty of confused people voting for Kamala. And I think that a lot of that confusion is the result of our corporate-owned, oligarchy-owned media who is totally willing to pit Americans against each other. If you can get the pitchfork people to fight against the torch people, then no one will notice the king behind the walls in his castle who's taking everyone, who's absconding with everyone's wealth for himself or their self. It really is. It's just I use this analogy probably too frequently, but it's as if the power structures, the economic power structures in America are able to use their media outlets to draw a chalk outline of a body on a sidewalk, and it's just disturbing to see people rush to lie down within that chalk outline to just accept to just be played like this, to just be played like a puppet, like a conductor conducting an orchestra, to just fall into line. But it is, and it's not people's fault who are taken in by the propaganda. Again, the person who wrote this Facebook post is one of the most loving, warm, empathetic people I've ever met. Like this person, I don't want to give too many details about their personal life for fear of possibly identifying them, but the things that they do with their life show a clear pattern of empathy and intelligence and warmth. And it's just bizarre to see that person converted into a conduit or a medium for these kind of ideas about the different factions within the working class excommunicating one another for the obvious reason of preventing any kind of class analysis whatsoever. Because that's one thing we don't have in America. We may have a middle class, but we go out of our way to avoid any kind of class consciousness whatsoever. And if we did have some class consciousness, that might serve as an antibody or an immune response to ridiculous ideas like the one we just heard.
Well, that's why you gotta, suppress class consciousness.
Yeah.
And say that Marxism is the devil.
No class analysis. Yeah, we're just gonna keep rolling without any sort of without noticing that some of us make money in our sleep off other people. It's just like, wow. Yeah, it's very, very odd. But again, there is almost nothing that's not odd about the 2024 election.
Well, it's a classic divide and conquer strategy.
Yeah. Yes.
And so, I guess, we feel like we're reasonably educated people, apparently. And so, therefore, we don't succumb to the idea that Trump is racist.
I hate to interrupt, but I let's put a pin in that. I might love to come around and steelman the Trump is a racist bigot argument later, but I just want to put a pin in that. I don't want to derail your thought.
Well, maybe. Well, certainly I wouldn't say that Trump is a racist because he had this comedian come on and, make a joke about Puerto Rico. And maybe it's insensitive, but to say that this shows that Donald Trump is a racist in that he plans to, glorify the white race and suppress all others seems like pretty dubious.
Do you think it's reasonable to hold the candidate accountable for the things said at their own campaign rally?
I think it does seem reasonable.
Not a comic, right? Not a comic has a specific role in society. The jesters, they're the truth tellers. The whole point of comedy is that you don't believe this person is really suggesting the things they're that is supposed to. Like you don't go to a movie and assume that the movie is actual reality, right? You understand there's a convention of the stage here. So I think we got to carve out a special allowance for like people whose job is to be a roast comedian. Is probably gonna the only weapon Hinchcliffe has in his toolbox is to say shocking and offensive things. That's what he did.
A tiger doesn't change his stripes. He was hired for a gig to show up and give his brand of comedy, and he did that. My thought is, since we're talking really about an election for the top office of the United States, it would seem to me. Thank you, Brian. It would seem to me that we should hold Donald Trump individually and solely, exclusively accountable for everything that's said, under his auspices, under his authority.
Well, I mean, what I think about, I'm not really excited to vote for Donald Trump. In fact, I already voted. So, and I voted for Donald Trump. But I'm not like, that's not like, what Donald Trump brings to the table is like, showmanship. And, it's like I'm voting for like RFK and Tulsi Gabbard and Elon Musk, basically, is what I'm interested in. And so, I don't know. So are you advocating that Donald Trump is like, racist to the core and he's going to come in and glorify the white race?
I would strongly advocate that Donald Trump, as a showman, knows how to use and invoke incendiary ideas of many kinds to excite a base. And at this point in the campaign, he made a decision to bring in a comedian with a certain background. That's my obtuse statement.
Did Donald make that decision? Does he know who Hinchcliffe is?
Well, I think it's fair to say in any case that, Donald Trump, I think, does play off racial tension. I don't think that's like a super controversial, or it certainly seems, that's part of being a showman, right?
He spends a lot of energy talking about racial dynamics in America. I say that as neutrally as I can.
Does he really? I'm not sure. Is that true? I don't know that to be true. I gave up on watching the Donald's rallies long ago, but I don't think it came up at all in his 3-hour Rogan interview.
Well, just there's a famous like very fine people speech, right?
But that's a clear example of a hoax because the man, if you include either the sentence directly preceding or directly after the very fine people, you will see he specifically excludes the white supremacists of Charlottesville from that statement, like explicitly with those words. So, I feel like that's just another example of.
Well, what he's saying is that there's people coming to, protest for and against the statutes of, Robert E. Lee, right?
Yeah.
Who's like a Civil War guy. And so some of those supporters are like KKK Nazis, and some of them are just regular Southerners who, I don't know, maybe they're not. Like, I don't know how morally defensible the supporting of Robert E. Lee statues is. But, there's also like the famous bloodbath remark, right? And so, like, obviously he was saying it would be a bloodbath for the Chinese economy if he gets elected. Not that it's going to be a bloodbath in America. And so, he's using language that gets attention in any case. And so, I think he must know what he's doing a little bit, I would imagine. In any case, though, I don't think that using language, suppose he is doing all that intentionally to cause drama. Does that make you a racist to say things that play upon racial lines? You could argue that doing that's like not healthy for America, not a good place for political discourse to be. But I guess I don't think it means that he is himself racist. Although maybe it doesn't matter because you're saying it's bad either way.
So. It may be worth pontificating on this point. One of the things that I've become aware of is a difference in the way that people use this term racism. Donald Trump, I think, clearly demonstrates some attitudinal racism.
What is the definition of racism?
What is the definition of racism? So some would say racism is prejudice plus power. Is prejudice held by people in positions of authority against minorities with less power? Some people would say racism is simply being racially bigoted. And that's a distinction that I think matters only because every American is groomed from a young age. Being racist is bad. You're not racist. Don't be racist.
Well, it doesn't sound like Donald Trump really meets either of those criteria.
Donald Trump, I think, if you were to get him in a room, would tell you he's not racist because he treats everybody equally. He loves and hates everybody irrespective of their race. But from another perspective, he also clearly uses racially bigoted language and ideals.
So I don't. I think we can just throw out the power plus bigotry definition of racism. I think we can dismiss that out of hand. It is perfectly possible to believe that one race is inferior or superior to another, being possessed of zero political power whatsoever. This is just a way of excusing things like saying white silence is violence. It is a way of excusing racist behavior on the part of minorities, which should not be ever excused. So I think we can just trash the like that just seems so. You can just obviously imagine someone who's racist but has no power whatsoever. You can just see that the political power. Like, it's terrible if racist people do have political power, but it's not a prerequisite for being racist, right? I just think that's not a strong definition. I think it does have to include the assumption that one race is superior or inferior to another. That's in a way that's essential to the race itself. If I said that, well, African Americans contain more melanin in their epidermal layer than white people, that's a generalization, but it's not a negative or positive. It's just an observation. So it would not be racist to observe that black folks have more melanin in their skin. Right? If you assume that Jewish people or black people or white people are inferior or superior for any reason, now you're in racial territory, assigning value based on race.
So hypothetically, if you were to set aside a value imbalance or the one race is superior to another, would you consider a situation with racial groups fighting over limited resources and organizing themselves around racial lines to be racist?
The race. Okay, so whenever you have a context of economic scarcity, someone's babies are not going to eat,
right.
And when someone's babies are not going to eat, you need to tell yourself a reason why you're depriving. If your babies are going to be the ones that are going to eat, you need to give yourself a story about why your neighbor's babies aren't going to eat and why that's okay. And human nature is to see. You alluded to this earlier. Human nature is to look for any superficial differences and then to make yourself feel better, to assign positive and negative positivity or negativity to the racial attributes in question. So my point is the holding hands, that we're all one, is entirely dependent on context of economic abundance. Because once you get to economic scarcity, you will have racism and sexism and every single kind of ism possible, right? So like it's like when there's the same or more food, we can operate as a cohesive unit. When there's not enough to go around, that racism and inevitability.
Yeah. Well, what it is tribal, and I guess tribalism is. I mean, like racism is probably like another layer. Like once people become tribal, and then you get like this racial tension between one group and another. I mean, that's when you start seeing what you might call racism, I suppose. So maybe it's like a precursor to racism.
Well, so Meyer, I think you said earlier that we're all raised from mother's knee to that racism is the worst possible thing you could be. This was my attitude in the 90s. The worst thing we can be is racism. Whatever else we do not want to be racist. And the reason for that is because this version of America, the one we live in, was founded as a part of World War II. World War II is our founding mythology, right? That's our mythological ethos. And the rationale for World War II was stopping the Holocaust. Now, never mind that we didn't know about the Holocaust till after we got our troops into Europe. Never mind all of that. The point was that we had to fight this horrific world war, or be a part of fighting this horrific world war, all to get rid of racism. And this is also the World War II is also the nexus out of which the intelligence services arose, which control society. I mean, probably the person who wrote the Facebook post to which we alluded to earlier doesn't know about Operation Mockingbird, in which the CIA installed, the CIA not just got control of, but like they installed their own people in the media in order to modify public opinion in the 1960s and 70s. And that all came out as a result of the Church and Pike Committee hearings in the mid-70s that came out of Watergate. It's just not, I mean, there's all kinds of insane CIA programs that came out as a result of that. And if people know about the Church and Pike Committee hearings, or they know about Operation Midnight Climax, or like Midnight Climax was where they in San Francisco they used prostitutes, the CIA did, to dose unknowing Johns with LSD and then observe them through one-way mirrors, right? And that is just doing this on unsuspected American citizens, right? Clearly way beyond the scope of CIA, but nonetheless it came out that they were doing this in the 70s.
It sounds like a wild time.
Yeah.
I wonder if they took LSD and watched people on LSD through one-way mirrors getting it on.
Everyone should watch that Clooney movie, The Men Who Stare at Goats, which is all about the CIA's full embrace of the paranormal. You see, because we became worried here that the Soviets were developing powers of mind control, and our military-industrial complex did not want to be left behind if mind control was on the table. And so that's what The Men Who Stare at Goats is all about. It's a sort of comical, fictionalized look at it's meant to be funny, but it's very real. The fact that CIA experiments with things like remote viewing is very real.
The CIA has spent decades cultivating remote viewing research and literature, that they've invested, like from a Western science perspective, an incredible amount of effort into what seems like junk fake science, but it's fascinating.
Yeah.
They're smart people. They must see some sort of capability there. I'm nervous about what we don't know about.
Yeah, there's Meyer, would you say there's an odd disparity or discrepancy between what the people in power tell us we ought to believe and then how they actually behave when when they think no one's looking? It's very interesting that they don't seem to have any loyalty to the materialist scientific worldview, though the ultra wealthy don't, when it comes time to actually operate. So just a little canard there.
All right. Well, I just want to tie the knot here on Donald Trump and racism. Because I don't know that.
Let's solve this right now. We'll figure it out.
Well, obviously, Donald Trump is in some ways an unsavory character. I mean, I don't know if he meets the actual definition of racism, but maybe he's unsavory in some other ways. But
we can definitely say for sure, though, that because of the specific American ethos in the post-war era, that whatever the Donald is or is not, we can be 100% certain that racist is being the worst thing you could possibly be, is going to be exactly that's how the media is going to tar and feather any outsider. Their actual racism does not matter in the least, right? The media, the CNN and MSNBC, right? These news outlets are going to portray the outsider as a racist, as a way of getting people to just foreclose on the possibility of anyone voting for him. And they pushed it hard in 16, didn't work. It worked in 20. I think it worked in 20, a lot to do with COVID. I mean, Joe Biden was promising a return to normalcy. And people were dying for that. And so that barely pushed the old man across the finish line. But here we are 4 years later. And as the election day looms and Harris sinks in the polls and the Donald rises in the polls, they've gone back to the racist canard, predictably and inevitably. And I have no idea how true it really is, because we can be sure we will be hearing all of this the Donald racist rhetoric. Totally, it's just disconnected from any actual state of being of the man himself. So that's why I'm just not so sure. I don't really know what I really know about the Donald's personal views of the different races. I just don't think. It may very well be that he harbors a secret suspicion that certain races are inferior or superior to others, but I don't think that we're going to be able to tell, because our media apparatus, our fact-finding apparatus, is so badly biased that I got to be completely agnostic on that point.
Well, and I think part of the challenge is the fact that we're even discussing as adults in America what racism is belies some other issues. I firmly think that I firmly believe, and I will swear up and down that this is the America that I grew up in. The reason why we are so nervous about being labeled as racist is because that is such an antithetical American concept. Coming out of World War II, we leaned into being a culture of this great melting pot. We Americans are a product of every nation in the world, colonizing, sending prisoners, whatever. The United States is that great melting pot. It has seemed to me very logical that we would be an anti-racist nation, and we have in our history books, in our national mythology, we march across the globe and we fight wars against racists. That's the story we tell ourselves. But it seems genuinely true that American values are shifting. Especially the GOP is now no longer seems to value immigration or the value of rich and diverse sort of ways of being or ways of thought. And I'm seeing very, very more acutely the GOP as part of its America First or national protective policy, whatever. There's a whole bunch of labels. The GOP is very much giving up on this idea of America's diversity being its strength.
Are they giving up on immigration altogether, or do they just want immigration in an orderly fashion? I think there is such thing as xenophilic restrictionism with respect to immigration, right? That meaning to say there's xenophobic opposition to immigration, but then there's xenophilic restrictionism as well. I just want to point out that position exists. I tend to agree with you. I mean, I'm not sure that the American government or any other militarized entity really has the ability to prevent the wanderings of the people, the fabled Volkswanderungen that are a part of history. Volkswanderungen, that's the plural. Volkswanderungen. The folk wanderings that are classic to German mythology, like the Cimbri and the Teutons who marched on Rome in the in the early part of the in like the first and second centuries BC, for example. Like, I'm not sure we have the power to really stop it. And I do think that the more cultural vibrancy you have, the better. You know, that people do need a cohesive culture, but every cohesive culture changes over time. And so, yeah, I don't know. I do think, to your point, that I do think that something is wrong at the southern border in terms of like a total lack of order there, like in terms of the chaos. Is that what the Republicans are responding to, or are they wanting to preserve America as it was in the 1950s? Probably a mix of both, right? It's not going to be just one or the other.
Yeah.
Well, if you're concerned, I mean, we just obviously have crazy amounts of homeless people, and it seems like, busing in like illegal. There's a lot of illegal immigration. It seems like happening, and so it seems like they were like ushered in, sort of, especially under Biden there. But
I used to work in tech, and my coworkers, I love them all. They were a good portion of them were Indians, and they were here on H-1B visas, and they were hard workers. Especially my mentor, whose name was Barath. I'll give a little shout out to Barath. No one's going to know who he is, but Barath. I just respected his competence. He was the best. But these guys were all here on H-1Bs, meaning they can't demand a raise. They're only allowed to work for the company that sponsored them, and they're all buying houses here, so they have no way to compete. Like they can't take, like, it's just like feudalism. They're not allowed to take their labor to the next feudal lord and try to get a better price for it, right? They're just stuck at whatever my former company, WEX, pays them. So I mean, there are definitely economic realities or consequences to immigration, unlimited immigration, limited. They all have economic fallout associated with them. Boy, I just feel like those H-1B visas are wildly exploitative, even to the foreign workforce who uses them.
Well, my feeling, I guess, is just ultimately there's a lot of people here already that we can't take care of. And so it's really not about, xenophobia or anything else. It just seems like we need to take care of the people we already have. Although I suppose you want to bring in, people from foreign countries who know how to do technical jobs, like your boy Barath there, and that's why they have these programs in place. I don't know. It seems like if you're for taking care of the people here, your best bet is to vote Republican on the ticket. I don't know. I don't know what the Democrats plan to do. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's any real plan, or at least certainly nothing happened in the last 4 years.
Well, there was a much touted bipartisan border bill that came very close to a vote and to becoming law. It was spiked by former President Donald J. Trump.
In what sense was it spiked by him?
The specifics weren't important, but he inserted his political will with the Senate Republicans to share with them that he was going to.
So he didn't vote on this bill. Other people did.
The bill was never put on his desk to sign.
He wasn't president at the time, right? He has no public office in the past few years.
That's an even better way to say it. He was not president. So he had no actual political authority, but he picked up the phone as a private citizen, say it as charitably as you can, and said, "Kill that deal."
And you're 100% sure about this? Because it's like if the Donald's name is actually affixed to the voter rolls, that's one thing. But now you're alleging behind-the-scenes influence. That's a tough thing to nail down. So how sure are we that that's the case? I understand that the mainstream media runs with it, but how sure are we that...
Mitch McConnell has accused him of it. However, you take all that with a grain of salt, right? That
Mitch McConnell, I do think you need a better, more trustworthy source than Mitch McConnell. But
J.D. Vance was talking about this on Joe Rogan's podcast, and what he said is that there's a bunch of other stuff in this bill, and that it was like a lot of amnesty with some border protection thrown in, and that a bunch of Democrats voted against it too.
But Vance was willing to suggest that the Donald's influence was the primary reason that the bill was spiked.
Well, no.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I'm just wondering if that's really the case.
Well, it is often the case that these bills have some things that you want and a bunch of other stuff, but I wouldn't be surprised if some political gerrymandering type thing happened in if the Democrats, I felt like we're actually trying to help the middle class, I'd be happy to vote for them. And I mean, whether or not Donald Trump spiked this immigration bill for political gain, I still don't have any confidence in the Democrats.
Well, I totally agree that the Donald spiking the bill if indeed that is within his capability for political purposes, is entirely plausible, right? That just seems like what you do on Capitol Hill, right? You don't allow someone else to take credit for your signature issue. So I'm not saying that it's not true. You're very careful what I go and like what conclusions I go ahead and believe these days, just with the total fecklessness of the media. I mean, you got to be really careful. But yeah, there is an element where the Republicans have traditionally been the party of business owners, and business owners love them some immigration. And it's interesting to note that the Clintons, having pioneered the funding of Democratic campaigns from the same sources that historically funded Republican campaigns, has really changed the game. So we really have two parties of business owners now, and that's got to be unlimited immigration, disorderly immigration. All these things are great for the prevailing conditions on the labor market, right? I mean, if you're running a business and I open up a business across the street that pays employees twice as much, well, all your employees are going to come to my business and work for me, unless right there. People like to say things like, "Well, under capitalism, you're free to just leave your employer and go to another one," overlooking the fact that everyone, the prevailing conditions in the labor market stitch everyone together and create this one, this one circumstance that we're all a part of.
You're always free to starve to death in a capitalist economy.
Absolutely. So yeah, it is interesting to see there's a utility in disorderly immigration for the powers that be. One is getting people on the vote, or getting people to vote whose status, whether legal or illegal, is historically favored the Democrats. But we're now seeing minorities like black men and Hispanic men, overwhelmingly overwhelmingly express support for the Donald. So yeah, immigration's a very interesting topic to get in on. There are so many different angles and ways of looking at the puzzle that it does make for interesting analysis.
And certainly, like, a practical reality is if you eat food that's been grown in the United States, like, almost certainly you've consumed the product, like the work product of an illegal immigrant, an unlawfully employed illegal immigrant. Like, if you eat lettuce that's been picked in America, guarantee you that lettuce was probably picked by a guy making a couple dollars a day.
Yeah. That guy should be making a lot more than a couple dollars a day, and they should be putting money away to Social Security and Medicare, and they should have retirement. It's just same with one interesting article written by the inimitable Caitlin Flanagan. This is probably 15 years ago now, but she wrote an article about how upper class women in their drive to be a girl boss have outsourced the raising their own children, usually to illegal immigrants that act as au pairs or nannies to their kids, and that these upper class women never take care to put away money for these nannies' retirements or for their Medicare or Social Security, so that when the kids turn 16, 17, 18, the au pairs no longer needed. They're just cut loose from the family, and that's the end of your relationship with them. So that's a very interesting analysis there. Just more examples of how our entire economy is propped up by exploited labor. Yeah, interesting stuff. And I suppose, gentlemen, if we are feeling like we have put the Facebook angle to bed and insisted on solidarity among the working class enough, then I think we can move on to the next topic conversation. Anyone else have any final thoughts?
One final point that should amuse both of you. I shared with an old friend that I'm going to be voting for Jill Stein this year, and I was accused immediately of being a Russian shill.
Wow.
Apparently, the Green Party gets a significant amount of its foreign funding from Russian either state government or actors. I get it. I get the line they're pulling, but it felt nice to have to tell somebody, hey, I've gone from Libertarian to Green Party, and have them just sneer at me and call me a Russian shill. That felt nice. It felt like being at home, because as a Libertarian, people say awful, nasty things out of ignorance and anger, and it felt nice to know that that's not just Libertarians that catch that. It's everybody. Everybody hates everybody's politics.
If you should stray from the two-party duopoly, it's amazing to see the immune responses that come out of people. You're just like, wow, no other possible reason to vote for Stein, right? It's not the immediate divestment of 50 to 75% of the military budget. It's not with the withdrawals from Ukraine and Gaza. It's not none of that stuff. No. It is definitely that you're Russian plant.
You'd think you'd notice that, like, if your eyes narrow and you start saying some shit that maybe you're not having like a rational reaction to the situation. A good story.
Well, gentlemen, I did come upon another interesting item on Twitter the other day. It's an article written by this guy Blair Fix. Thought it was pretty interesting. And Blair Fix went through and analyzed the affordability of houses by creating graphs that graph the housing affordability versus, on the one hand, average income, and on the other hand, median income. Now, on both graphs, you can see that the prices of housing since the mid-2000s have shot upwards. But on the average income graph, it's not that much of a spike. You can just see that houses are not that much more unaffordable versus the average income than they were in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s.
Nate, could I interrupt very briefly?
Yes.
Would you pretend like I don't know what average and median mean?
Well,
why are those two things different, and why are they interesting?
Well, all right. So I actually have a simile all ready to go because it's a distinction well worth making. You see, let's suppose that Brian, suppose you and me are 49 and 51 years of age. What's our average age?
50.
50. Now, suppose that you're 0 and I'm 100. What's our average age?
50.
All right. So in the first case, the average age is a meaningful measure. It represents some reality. It represents a common. You and I are close in age, so we say our average age is 50, and it tells you where that average age is. But in the second example, where one person's 100 and the other person's 0, well, then the average doesn't really tell you anything important. Now, the median, on the other hand, is if let's say you've got a dozen numbers, so you've got 12 numbers, you line them all up in order of least to greatest, and then you take the middle number. And if there's an odd number, you take the middle two and divide them in half and take the middle of that. So if Brian, let's say that you're 0 years old, and Sir Meyer, let's say that you're 30, and then let's say that I'm also 30. Well, let's say that I'm 60. That means that 30 is the median here. And because of the numbers I've chosen, it's exactly the same as the average in this case. But if one of us was 0 and the other one was 99 and the other one was 10, well, now your median age is 99, right? So you can see that the median...
10. Your median age is 10 if we're 0, 10, and 99.
Did I say 10? I meant to say 0, 100, and 100. 0, 100, and 99. Did I say 10?
Yes.
All right, so imagine person 1 is 0 years old, person 2 is 100 years old, and person 3 is 99 years old, right? Well, your average is going to be like 93 or what. I don't exactly know what the average would be, but the median is going to be the middle number, 99, right? So the graphs of average incomes show that as a whole, the American people are taking in about the same amount of money, are paying about the same percentage of our average income among everyone for a home. There has definitely been a spike upward, but it's not a dramatic. It's just like a slow drift. But then when you take the median income, which means you might have millions of people making $15 an hour, but then you got a few billionaires to really skew the average. But having those few billionaires does not skew the median, right? So again, you have a million people making $15 an hour, then you have a couple billionaires. Well, you're going to get an average that seems like a normal income, but really, a few people are taking everything, while most people just rot, right? So the point here is that during the 1970s, we had the maturation of some technologies that facilitated the upper class of getting their revenge for the New Deal and taking all of our money back and restoring a Gilded Age like the one portrayed in Titanic that was here prior to the stock market crash of 29. Some of those examples of those technologies are telecommunications technology, right? It's impossible to coordinate the closure of a factory here in the United States and the reopening of the same factory in China without instantaneous communication. So you get the fax machine and long-distance telephone and international jet travel, which really facilitates the movement of these... The movement of the mass offshoring of the American manufacturing capacity, which, as I always say, is quite the historical anomaly. The voluntary deindustrialization of a country is something we've not seen since the Industrial Revolution. And then to compound that error, by relocating said manufacturing capacity within the borders of your chief economic rival is a tactical or a strategic move so dunderheaded that there's really no way that you could muster the crude apparatus of the English language to describe it. It's just a sad state of affairs, strategically speaking.
It always seemed to me like it's an artifact of the fact that the Chinese state government is so much more in control of its own quote private sector economy. Like as much as we grumble about private sector's influence on our government, the Chinese business landscape is the inverse, right?
Yeah.
The Chinese economy is a tool of the Chinese state government.
We-
And it shows.
You got a Chinese government, that's in control of its economy, and then you have a bunch of rich people who are trying to make as much money in the short term as possible here in America, and it's basically a match made in heaven, right?
Yeah. The other big thing that happened in the 1970s was the rollout of propaganda via CIA channels, Operation Mockingbird, that sent our women to work also alongside the men. Now, obviously, we had a bunch of rigid industries in America that should be diversified, but the way that we addressed that issue was to double the size of the labor force in a few short years, the Murphy-Brown years. And now we're in a state, since the cost of housing represents the amount that banks can get people to loan against the houses, we're now in a situation where you basically need to have two incomes in order to hope to afford a house. It's all been, all of this, the proliferation of technology that allows offshoring, the second wave feminism. Gloria Steinem, of course, is one of the mothers of second wave feminism. She and her posse received CIA funding through a cutout called Ms. Magazine. And another one of our famous mothers of feminism is a psychologist named Harriet Fraud. You can find her podcasts on the internet, and Harriet Fraud still talks to this day about how much she regrets allowing. They were like, she was, the way she puts it, all that money was too good to be true. They should have seen it for what it was, and it came at a terrible price. Right? The way that you deal with the gender inequality of the gendered workforce is to there are plenty of ways to include people in the workforce without driving down the price of labor, so that two workers now get paid what one worker got paid 50 years ago. The example I always use is that we ought to be paying people for childbearing. Child care is crucial economic labor. Previously, it went unrecognized, or another way of saying it is that the woman's share in the household income came through her husband as a conduit, right? That is the fundamentally exploitative capitalist system of the 1950s that so many women object to, right? What we should have done is gotten those women the money that they earned in a way that's not through their husband, right? Because you're just setting yourself up for an abusive situation if one person is the pass-through for another person's income, right? That money should have been taxed from the corporations who so desperately need new young workers to be born and sent and educated every year.
And there's so many ways that turns into other systems of control. If one person in the household controls the income, they control the household, and they're able to assert any level of control or will that they choose.
Yes, yeah.
Standard patriarchal criticisms right there.
Well, instead we got the old destroy the American family.
Right. Yeah.
And,
send the women to work. Send the kids to childcare. You won't be seeing your parents till they pick you up at childcare at 5:30. Divorce rates spike. I mean, the school shootings through the roof. Like the famous example I always use is that of juvenile male elephants. If they don't have patriarchal old male elephants to show them how to channel their testosterone and all of the weird feelings that come with going through puberty, the juvenile male elephants become so antisocial that they get excised from their herd and are sent off to live on their own and die. Like, I mean, you're just like, this elephant is out of control, and it needs, like, you just need an older male elephant to show the younger male elephants how to handle themselves so that they can actually be integrated into elephant society. And well, you can just see where so many of our societal problems are downstream of this CIA bamboozle in the early 1970s.
Can I interject one other small story?
Yeah.
Because this is heartwarming and it might bring tears to your eyes. I took my nephew out for a bike ride yesterday.
How old is your nephew?
He's 7.5.
7.5. Okay.
He insisted every time we passed a piece of trash that he stop and pick it up and put it in his pocket.
Hey, the kids are all right, huh?
Yep. My dad, his grandpa, my dad, like a lifelong outdoorsman, hunter, guy loves the outdoors right from a young age. Every time he was outside with my nephew, they picked up trash. He beat it into him. Not beat it into him, but sort of, made sure that my nephew recognized that it was a certain part of enjoying the outside natural world that we pick up trash. And this kid, because he has so many good influences in his lives, is just, while he's out playing on his own, is stopping and picking up trash. It's the coolest thing I've ever seen.
It really goes to show the importance of having both your parents in your life versus not knowing one parent. I don't even know which one's worse. Like, for humans, is it worse for young men to have no maternal influence in their life? Is it worse for young girls to have no paternal influence in their life, probably the same gender is the most devastating. But missing either component is rough going, man. That's a tough road to hoe.
I think, like any people, having more loving people in your household, the better. One parent, two parents, five parents, a couple of grandparents, like
A whole village.
yeah, a whole village. You're exactly right. Like having positive social experiences in kids' lives is good for them. And when families break up, those kids start to get ping ponged around. They go to different schools. They play different sports teams, and it's hard. I think I say this. I won't dredge up any memories, but it seems like it's a hard place for a kid without a stable home to have any sense of community and belonging.
Yeah. Yes. Definitely.
Anyway, so to what we're talking about here, having the presence to offer role modelship for younger members of society and to make sure that our children collectively, oh my God, I'm about to make a cat lady comment. we very much should be ensuring that our children collectively are being provided for and cared for, not simply our children, meaning our own offspring, but we as a society, if we want to be able to have a future for our own individual kids later, we need to make sure that every kid has opportunities.
Right. If you want sustainability, this is plan 1A.
Well, we gotta stop being like rubes for propaganda, right?
It'd be nice.
It goes back to your friend's Facebook post there, where I feel like they're just being a bit of a rube for propaganda, and I don't know how we. I mean, we're all privately educated, critical thinkers, and clearly we've unsuccumbed to the government propaganda.
Some people just have a right to be dumb, right? This person, however your friend arrived at this, I don't mean to sound too condescending, but they have reasons for believing what they believe, and it's really hard as an enlightened, educated white man to look at other people making different choices and not think that they're dumber than I am. It's a reflex that I've had to suppress over the years.
I actually think education works against us in this regard.
What?
This person is not unintelligent. This is a perfectly intelligent person. I just think that you have to consider the fact that maybe CNN and MSNBC, are exactly like Fox News, right? It can't be that Fox News is a propaganda, but CNN and MSNBC are gospel, right? I just think this person still trusts and still believes. That's what's happened here. They still have trust and belief, and I just think you cannot trust the news media or the oligarchy or their many representatives little enough. You cannot be too mistrustful of these people, and some folks are still having trouble coming to the conclusion that I always bring up our dear friend of the show, Vlad. I hope his mom Nachka doesn't listen to this show, but he always says about her that he loves his mom, but that she believes the propaganda coming out of Belgrade, and that he feels too sad for her to disabuse her of just let her. It makes her happier to believe this. I think about that a lot. Is it really better to go around red pilling people? Probably not. But also, I just bring that up because is not a measure of intelligence, and I think even education, you may have a more education may create a stronger belief in institutions, and it may make you trust authority more, intellectual authority more. Right? You've been educated at the knee of intellectual authority. You're going to have a greater trust for that authority, probably than you would if you were just a regular Joe.
Well, the good news is we're sort of moving into this is going to be the podcast election, I guess. If the Donald wins, maybe it'll be because he and JD Vance went on Rogan, and if Kamala wins, well, I guess it's because she went on Call Me Daddy or whatever it is. And but anyway, well, it seems like we were. I mean, even if Elon Musk isn't put in some kind of position of power, I mean, I think that having a social media company that's owned by, not lockstep with the rest of the establishment, is good news. And so we kind of lost our way a bit. And, speaking of succumbing to propaganda, the whole COVID business happened. But we're kind of back on track here. And while people temporarily lost their minds for a few years there, I mean, it seems like people I saw on Reddit where they were posting clips from that Trump podcast, and they were, making, because Trump was, what was Joe Rogan asking him about? I think the election denying, and they were pointing out how Donald Trump gave an unsatisfying answer. And So now, I mean, so you can't really say that Joe Rogan is like the worst person of all time, and then uses clips as a way to, like, you can't like undermine his integrity as a podcaster when you're citing him for Donald Trump giving unsatisfying answers, and so like in any case, like Joe Rogan and Elon Musk are relevant, which I mean is a good sign. And like ultimately, the solution has to be we just have to like communicate more and let the bright rays of sunshine of God spread into our fellow human being via technology.
I will say, as nervous as I am about other ramifications of a Donald Trump victory, I can absolutely foresee a future where he would put Elon Musk in charge of rehabbing the federal workforce. Musk has commented on this a little bit about finding inefficiencies and rooting out messes in government. And I think Elon Musk is an interesting person to deploy to fix that problem. Not the best person, but as clearly capable.
As a libertarian, you must be like itching with anticipation at the idea of cutting $2 trillion from the federal budget, eh?
Yeah. He cut 80% of Twitter's workforce in a year.
That's correct. Yeah. 80%.
So, I mean, sucks for those guys, but that's a potential that I see in the federal government. It's a thing that I've critiqued the government forever is the bureaucratic waste and efficiencies that comes from bloated process. And Elon Musk seems to be in a unique position to step in and make some changes because the boss he'll have will just not give a shit what he does and we'll give him a blank check. So that'll be a fun ride. I'm not sure I'm going to be happy where it goes, but it'll be interesting to see what that process looks like. There will be a lot of fat taken out of the government.
I'm certainly, I wouldn't say that I'm delighted with the way Twitter is now, but it makes me very happy that I don't know what to make of Elon. Sometimes he seems crazy and sometimes he seems like a hero, but he's not just going to do what the CIA and FBI and NSA call and tell him to do on Twitter, which I think that right there is a huge improvement over the situation we were in 2020.
Yeah, I wonder if he'll have the federal government somehow making money off of like snuff films, which is pretty much what the Twitter is now.
It's so funny to me to see people on Reddit, as you alluded to, Brian, talking the Atlantic article this past week. Just a bizarre article talking saying Joe Rogan's like the worst person in anticipation of the Donald Trump. But like the mainstream media, of which the Atlantic is a fixture in that constellation, lied us into Iraq and Afghanistan. If you just go no further than that, don't invoke like the COVID era, right? Like they lied us into Iraq and Afghanistan. You would think that would earn them the title of worst people in the world, or at least something like Joe Rogan and Twitter. They aren't lying us into wars, right? That's not. You would think that people would. You think that the episodes in the mid 2000s when the Democrats were the good guys and we were in those crazy terror wars, you would think that analysis would still be relevant 10 years later, but I don't feel like it.
It's hard to believe we fell for the propaganda in the first place, but it works, I guess. And I mean, calling Joe Rogan like the worst person of all time has to be like the most asinine statement of all time.
Right. He doesn't lie to us in any wars, so I feel like that right there takes him out the running. The worst person of all time. Oosh.
I think I don't want to sound too much like a bro, but I think Joe Rogan's impact on men in America has been net positive.
Agreed. The withdrawal of empathy, to which you referred earlier, has definitely happened, particularly to white men. It's like taking some empathy that used to go to white men and taking it away, and then instead of expanding your overall circle of empathy, treating it like a zero-sum game and like taking some empathy away from people who have too much and giving it to people who have too. That's just such a crazy project.
Well, one thing at least is that Joe Rogan's gotten Mark Zuckerberg into MMA, and now like Zuckerberg seems like a real person instead of like a lizard person. And at least based on his one podcast there, he sounds less likely to succumb to government intervention in his social media platform. So I mean, we can all be thankful for that. I guess I was just trying to think briefly, like how much has Joe Rogan impacted my life? And I guess, I think that ChatGPT has impacted my life like a whole lot. And so I guess I don't think he's really like helped me become a man per se, but I do think the influence on Mark Zuckerberg might be like the biggest way he's impacted, our collective lives here. Yeah.
One of the things I like about Joe Rogan a lot is when he's wrong about something or when he doesn't know something, he doesn't bring a lot of ego to it. He's wrong about some things. He believes some things that I think are untrue, but when he's in an area where he knows he's not competent, he's very self-aware and quite quick to say, I don't know about that. Can we find out? He catches a lot of criticism for not fact checking, but he's got a guy there ready to Google stuff for him in his pod. He represents a version of masculinity that is like open and willing to contend with ideas. He's not somebody who gets explosive when he's offended by something, and I think that's admirable for as much of a basic bro as he otherwise is.
Yeah, well, people on the Joe Rogan subreddit try to have like these gotcha moments, like, "Oh, Joe Rogan has biases," or "Look, Joe Rogan like got something wrong." Like, I mean, that's that. I mean, so what you're saying is that Joe Rogan is a human being, and I mean, just obviously, yeah, they fact check the things, and if he finds out he's wrong about something, he doesn't have a problem coming on and admitting it. And overall, like, I just can't imagine being one of these people who thinks that Joe Rogan's one of the worst people of all time. Man, that is just such a backwards position. And I wonder how your friend feels about Joe Rogan.
Oh, I don't think. Well, I guarantee you, this person will believe that Joe Rogan is an example of toxic masculinity, and has come to that belief totally absent of actually listening to any of the actual pods in question. Right? That's usually how this goes.
Yeah, pretty classic.
One of the things I have gained from him, and I think this is what his mission is for the podcast, is he's just exposed me to a couple of people who are also content creators that I now follow. He's built a real core of people that are talking about health and medical science in a way that's landing with me. There, I don't want to say he's formed the group, but there's a group of doctors and physicians and health folks who are he's loosely associated with these people. They're on his pods. They do guest spots. I picked up a few of them.
Is there anyone in particular you're talking about?
Kelly and Casey Means, I think we were talking about a couple weeks ago. I've also picked up Andrew Huberman's podcast as a regular listen.
Brigham Buell is another one. Brigham Buell is huge on health. I do not skip his pods when you see him pop up on the JRE.
Whenever Stamets shows up, he talks about advances in integrative health with mushrooms. Obviously, Paul Stamets is there because everybody wants to hear him talk about tripping balls.
I've got the Stamets 7, mushroom blend in my cupboard right now. It goes in my smoothie every day.
And if I, candidly, full serious, if I hadn't listened to Joe Rogan, I wouldn't have understood, I wouldn't have been open to that health potential for mushrooms beyond, the psychedelic. Because I listened to Paul Stamets blather on for a couple hours about the major integrative advances that we're making, rediscovering things about mushrooms. And I felt Joe Rogan's enthusiasm going, "Whoa, man, that's fucking cool." Like, I was right there with him. And that was cool. In the vein of having a positive male role model, Joe Rogan's a guy who asks questions. He's kind of a doofus, and he would admit that. But he asks questions. He puts himself in the room with smart people, and he lets them talk. There's something really admirable about that.
I agree. I think that Rogan's...
I didn't realize you were a Russian shill, Meyer. Sorry.
I think the perch of egolessness in which our friend Rogan is situated, which we've now alluded to a couple times, really makes him like a great conduit. I mean, he's a really good interviewer. Now, in August, I interviewed Michael Hudson. Brian and I interviewed Michael Hudson here on the pod, and boy, interviewing is a lot harder than I thought it was. I had great questions. I was all prepared. But it was just hard to think up those follow-up questions in real time. I was busy focusing on the format of the whole conversation, and I couldn't, I just felt like I couldn't respond as well. If I had to do it again, I'd do better.
Well, podcasting itself is hard work. If the mean, median, and mode example from earlier is any example. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, all told, I filled out my ballot here on the air last week, and I voted for Dr. Jill Stein. I just think that her policy proposals match my own, but in Maine we have ranked choice voting, and I will admit that the Donald's appearance on the aforementioned JRE almost made me remove him from the ranks of my ranked choice voting, but I did end up adding the Donald in there, in the mix with Cornel West. So,
are you comfortable sharing your racked stank? Or stacked rank. Whoops.
Your stanked rack.
Yes, yeah, I did. Man, I'm gonna forget the fourth one. The fifth one, excuse me. But anyway, my ranking, my first choice, Dr. Jill Stein. My second choice, Donald Trump. My third choice was Dr. Cornel West, and my fourth choice was Chase Oliver and Mike Termat of the Libertarian Party. There was a fifth one on there that I threw in, and I can't remember what the fifth one was. It's like some other unity party or something. So I filled out a bubble for everyone and left Kamala's bubble blank. because I just feel like the Democrats cannot be rewarded for betraying the working class. They must represent the working class as a part of their platform. If they do not do this, then we are a one-party state. So that's what I did.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Donald Trump Joe Rogan pod was mostly a stinker, but I think the JD Vance one that just came out is really pretty encouraging. And man, yeah, I've listened to RFK and Elon and JD Vance. I mean, JD Vance kind of looks like a schmuck. But he looks like he's wearing eyeliner or something.
Some actors look like that. There's the guy who played the mayor in The Dark Knight. He was also from Lost. If you saw his face, he's one of these these actors who's in all kinds of stuff, but no one knows their name. They're always playing bit parts. But yeah, what is there's a specific look where like someone looks like they've got eyeliner on. They have really dark eyelashes or something.
It seems like Middle Eastern or something, or I don't know what it is. But anyway,
Mediterranean is what I think. But
yeah, that's it. But well, anyway, they're just, I don't know, a lot of people who like sound like intelligent and like they're just not like establishment shills. And man, yeah, I just can't imagine not just I feel. I'm so attuned to when someone's an establishment shill, I guess. And yeah, just obviously Kamala's like not like a real person. She can't go on Joe Rogan. She can't articulate why her presidency would be different than Biden's. And she like what her plans for the future are. Yeah, I can't imagine it. And I guess I don't know, like I voted for Donald Trump and I don't care about the Donald, but I mean, I'm like super excited about the people in his cabinet. They're like our good listens. It's like unbelievable. Really, I think we're going through. I mean, if this actually like works, I mean, we could really be in for it in terms of like some kind of like positive societal change, man.
This week, RFK announced that Donald was going to allow him to reshape the FDA and the CDC, and
Health and Human Services. I think.
Yeah, there's a collection of these 3-letter agencies that are just hopelessly mired in regulatory capture. So.
Yeah, I mean, I know like people are like sensitive about this whole like vaccine business. And you know what? You're going to be able to take vaccines if you want. And, where Pfizer is not going away as a company.
Right.
But yeah, like obviously we have like a health problem in America. And like I just like can't imagine not wanting like fresh blood or someone to come in and shake stuff up. And like just the quality of the food is like just so terrible. And like we gotta get going in a positive direction here. It's I mean I think really probably the future is like super exciting. And I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably. I mean, I got to think that going on Joe Rogan's like a big deal, and this is going to be the Joe Rogan podcast election, and the future of the political discourse and the country itself is going to change drastically in a positive way.
Your lips to God's ears, Brian.
Yes, sir.
I'm not quite so optimistic about all of that, and that's okay.
You're bringing the doom and gloom. Well,
because
that's cool.
What's going to happen will happen. whatever choice we make on Tuesday, like there's going to be an outcome, and we're going to have to cope with that. And I genuinely think the world's not going to be very different tomorrow, a year later, or 4 years later, regardless of who wins. The biggest potential, the biggest opportunity that I see with the potential Trump presidency is that his rapid dismantling of the federal government and the way that he will destabilize our collective trust in government at all levels will create a rocky time, but it will create an opportunity for perhaps a new constitutional convention or a reimagining of the way that our government works to serve the people in the future. And I think the Harris presidency will not advance toward that. The Harris presidency is a vote for establishment. A vote for Donald Trump is a vote for the purge. If that's your choice.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a wild card, but at least it's not the establishment.
I just think of like Donald Trump as like the crazy ringleader to the circus, and he's really not the attraction, but like the circus is full of great shows and stuff. You just kind of got to get past the guy, out there with a cape or whatever, doing his crazy thing, and that's really like just how you'd want it. And I don't know. I guess I'm super optimistic. We'll have to see how it goes, and we'll have you back on, Meyer, to talk about it. Yep.
Well, gentlemen, it's been a real pleasure. And usually at the end of these pods, I encourage our listeners to send us an email. Let us know why our political views are warped.
Yeah, why we're Russian shills.
Yeah. And you can address your email to knob@substack.com if you want to let us know what you think. Furthermore, you can log on to knob.substack.com to get an exciting weekly essay written by yours truly about the grand trajectory and rise and fall of civilization itself. You can sign up there to receive these emails to your email inbox instead of having to find them. That way, you shan't have to worry about missing any. Alrighty, folks. Well, with that, we'll bid you goodbye, and we'll see all of you on the other side.
All right, adios.
Namaste.